Welcome, mortals. My name is Barbara, and I'm the Seam Reaper.
And my name is Alexandra, and I'm the Painter of Souls.
Here's a quick recap. This is the Enchanterium, this is Elthirien, the Spirit of Darkness, and in today's video we'll be making Lord Drexmor, Elthirien's fiance, and, you know, the king of the Undead.
This channel needs more boy doll repaints, and I'm so excited to customize this Nathan Roth doll from Monster High series. I have a big sentiment for this doll because our very first video on this channel was transforming a Nathan doll into Aurelion Sol from the League of Legends. I quickly prepared this doll. I took off his unicorn horn, cut his long, fabulous hair and tail, removed all the hair leftovers from the inside of the head using scissors and tweezers, and wiped off his factory makeup with pure acetone. Let's go straight into repainting his face. I sprayed his head with MSC twice and started with a layer of pastels. I usually start with eyes, but when I'm not sure where to place them, I start with eyebrows so I can see where the rest needs to be. He's going to have very thick brows, which I love, and I'm drawing them with chalk pastels. We received some reference drawings of this character, and for the most part we're going to stick to them. However, we got permission to redesign him a little bit, so I decided to accept what the mold is giving me and enhance the zombie part of his face. For the eyes, I'm using a black watercolor pencil. I will be going back and forth from the eyes to the muscles, so I'm sorry for the chaotic narration, but you know, I want to work on the whole face on every layer of MSC so I don't waste materials. At first, I thought blue and pink is a good idea for the muscles, but then I changed it to blue and orange. In the end, I chose red instead of orange, but we'll get back to it. Just as his fiancé Elthirien, he has black eyes with blue irises. To add even more undeadly features, I drew some black marks on his skin to imitate cracks. I feel like this balances the face so the right part of his face doesn't look too empty. It's time to add the first portion of hair to his brows. Yes, there will be more. I'm adding the first layer of highlight with a white pencil and second round of brow hair, this time in white. I'm switching to white paint because I made the irises a bit too small and white pencil doesn't have enough coverage on top of black. Third round of brow hair. I like to add white hairs to the brows, especially on deeper complexions. It emphasizes the general brow shape and adds a lot of detail. I'm also painting some of the cracked edges with white paint to make them a bit more 3D looking. Lines on the zombie part will help imitate real muscles. Then I'm jumping back to the eyes and drawing the pupils and changing his eye color to light blue. I like long lashes on male dolls and he's no exception. I'm detailing the muscle part with light blue and he's almost ready. In the reference drawings, Drex has a little beard and that's what we're going to do next. I started it with watercolor pencils and after a layer of MSC, I'm painting it with acrylics. The last round of black eyebrow hair and the face is ready.
Drex will have a very simple outfit, as it only serves as a base for his armor. I took Nathan's original shirt and ripped it at the seams to trace the pattern off of it. The process starts where the sewing would end, which means the closures usually have to come off first. It's tedious work, but I try not to rush it so I don't cut through the fabric by accident. Next, I can iron the parts out to get a somewhat accurate pattern. I don't need all of the pieces, as the backs and the sleeves are the same, mirrored pieces. I'm taking the front piece and folding it in half and tracing it onto some paper. We only need to trace a half, cause we can cut it out and fold. I didn't seam rip all the hems as they were done with a serger, so I'm adding a seam allowance where needed. I traced the rest of the pieces in a similar fashion. Get it? Fashion? I measure the corresponding seams to make sure they are of the same length. I'm cutting the pattern out of a stretchy black fabric. I'm using my rotary cutter and a mat, which is my favorite combo for cutting stretchy stuff. I'll be using a walking foot to help sew through the stretchy stuff too. Make sure your equipment is nice and clean before you use it. The foot may look a bit intimidating, but it's easy to use and install. You simply unscrew the normal foot, pop the walking foot in, and tighten it down. It's not much of a hassle, and the results are worth it. Let's get the thread in the machine and start sewing. I doubted myself here and trimmed the extra seam allowance that I added to the pattern before. This is a raglan style sleeve, so I attached the sleeves to the front, and next I'll attach the backs to the sleeves, all right sides together. Next, I hem the sleeves with a zigzag stitch to allow for stretching. At this point, I decided to do a preliminary fitting, so I pinned some seams in and decided that the cutting off of the extra seam allowance was a bad idea. To fix that, I'm going to add a turtleneck, so basically a strip of fabric at the neckline. Much better. I added a zigzag stitch below the turtleneck to keep the seam allowance flat and the collar upright. Now I can finally pin the sleeves and the side seams and close the shirt. After another fitting, I decided to slim the shirt down a bit since I didn't want it to look too bulky. It's almost ready. I added a zigzag hem at the bottom of the shirt and decided to make the shirt without a closure, so I pinned it on the doll, marked where to sew, and after stitching, cut the seam allowance down. The shirt is done. Unfortunately, it looks a little bit more like Steve Jobs instead of the Lord of the Undead, but we're gonna roll with it. Now it's time for a quantum physics break. Just kidding, I used my old notes as pattern making paper. I cut out the pattern pieces out of the same stretchy jersey. I joined the front and backs together and hemmed the trousers. If it's already looking suspiciously short, you have a good eye. I sewn the front raise together next, hemmed the waist, and tried to convince myself that the length of the pants was not going to be an issue. I sewn the back, and finally it was time to burst my bubble and face the fact that this pattern was made for the bulkier Ever After Harry boys and was also ridiculously short. I tried to take the pants in and ignore the length, but in the end I decided to start from scratch. Thank God. I repeated the same pattern making process as I did for the shirt. I cut it out of cotton this time. Putting it together is mostly the same. Front raise, hem the waist and the legs, sew the back, but this time leave a butt allowance since the cotton is not stretchy. Then the last seam is the inner leg seam. Say goodbye to this old atrocity and hello to the new perfect fit pants. As the closure, I reused the Velcro from Nathan's pants.
Let's make him an armor. I prepared a template made from paper and transferred it onto craft foam. I'm connecting the pieces with hot glue.
Fight!
I started gluing a grey ribbon to it, but decided to paint all the elements first. To add a texture, I'm using black 3D fabric paint from Arteza. I'm used to painting with cellophane cones because that's what I use for henna, so I'm filling a similar cone with this paint. It has different consistency than henna, and it's more difficult to control, but it's still more precise than painting directly from the factory tube. If you want to check out my henna art, you can find the link to my Instagram in the description. I'm drawing thin lines around the edges of the craft foam shapes, and I will be decorating all the pieces this way. I'm making the arm guards from the same craft foam, and I'm adding decorative shape to it to add something interesting. I have to say, I don't know much about real armors and their functions. This one will be inspired by armor in games, as this is the aesthetic I know best. I'm going for a dark and a bit dangerous vibe, and I thought some horns and spikes would suit it. I'm making a few horns from silk clay as it's very light and has similar texture to craft foam when cured. I'm painting them blue to match his eyes. Let's go back to the chest plate. After painting it, I'm gluing it directly to the outfit. We like when the doll can change outfits, but sometimes the visuals are more important. I'm adding more of the same grey ribbon to imitate more armor. Then I made the belt with some more fancy pieces that I don't think have any function and glued it on the doll. To cover the ugly part on his back, I made a simple back plate and glued it on the outfit. When I did that, I realized that I like the simple design on the back more than the chest plate with many details, and I decided to take a risk and try to remove the part that I didn't like anymore. I made a new chest plate and placed it on. For some reason I forgot to record decorating it, but you'll see how it turned out later. He needs some shoes. The trousers are a bit too wide for my taste, and since the top part of his outfit is already not replaceable, I decided to make them more narrow my way, and this way includes hot glue. Honestly, this doll is all about hot glue. I know I said in our previous video that I don't trust it, but that was a different situation, okay? For the base of his shoes, I'm using silk clay and sculpted directly on his feet. Then I'm adding details from craft foam in a similar fashion as the rest of the armor. I added more clay on the bottom, and now I'm gluing the sole from a thicker craft foam. To cover the difference in materials and shapes, I'm adding a long strip of foam around the whole shoe. Off camera, I painted the edges with 3D fabric paint, and now I'm painting the shoes to match the rest of the armor with a dark silver paint. I added a small spike on each shoe, and they are ready. I have to admit it's not my finest work, but I'm not a shoe expert, so I'm content with the result.
I'm going to make a cape for this guy, but first I need to figure out the shape of the cape. I'm going to drape it on the doll, using a piece of cotton from an old bed sheet. I'm manipulating the fabric and pinning it until it becomes a nice cape shape. Using a marker, I'm drawing the shape of the edge and just roughly thinking the cape into existence. When I'm ready to get more serious with the dimensions, I bust out a ruler to make sure the cape is somewhat symmetrical. I play with the mock-up a little bit more, making sure the details like the neckline are how they should be. When I'm happy with the fit, I take the seams apart so I can trace the cape onto the final fabric. The shape of the bottom looks funny because I folded the fabric too many times. I'll make sure to fix it in the final version. I'm cutting the cape out of a deep blue velvet. I didn't bother tracing the pattern onto paper, and I'm cutting it directly around my mock-up. I transfer all relevant marks and sew them in. I hand-stitched the neckline, since the velvet is a very fussy fabric to sew on the machine. I added a hook and eye closure to the front of the cape. It's not all the same color, but it was the last pair I had. The cape was covering a bit too much of the outfit underneath, so I decided to trim it back a little bit. I did it in a messy and jaggedy style, which I think fits a Dark Lord quite nicely. I made a big mess with the velvet fibers, so I had a lint roller on standby.
We made chest armor, arm guards, and shoes. Now it's time for pauldrons. I tried to make them from silk clay and they didn't turn out bad, but I was struggling with making them symmetrical. Good old craft foam will do the job again. I shaped the pieces over the candle to maintain the new shape and glue the decorative parts. As I said before, this is more like a game aesthetic design. Let's say it's a casual armor to look cool. I'm gluing the pieces to the coat and then adding the spikes. They need to match the spikes on the gauntlets, so I'm painting them blue. For his hair, I'm going to use black yarn. It's funny to me that the hair is the last step on this doll. It's usually the very first thing I do when I start a doll customizing project. I'm dividing the yarn strands into 3 parts and then brushing it slightly, but I still want to keep the wave. I'm gluing these half-brushed yarn fibers on a plastic document sleeve with white glue. Before I glue the hair, I need to attach his ears. Just like Aurelion's soul, he's going to have his horse ears placed lower. I'm gluing them using 2-part epoxy glue to secure them really well. I'm starting the hair from the bottom at the back of the head. The hair wefts I made have a lot of volume, so I'm trying to keep the balance between having too much hair and having everything covered. When I reach the top of the head, I'm making the part. I'm gluing it in the opposite direction, and after everything is dry, I flip it. Then I repeat on the other side of the head. Off camera, I put some of his hair in a little ponytail so they don't cover his face. The original idea was that the cape is removable, but it was covering almost all armor on the chest and arms, so we decided to glue it on the shoulders in a different position. As a last detail, I added a few rhinestones on his chest armor, and with that, the doll is finished.
This is how he turned out. I think this might be our first doll couple on this channel, so I hope you like how they turned out. It was fun to make characters that have to go together in some way. I hope you guys are doing okay and are in good health. We, unfortunately, aren't, as you may have noticed by my nasal voice in this video. We're currently isolating together and are about to kill each other, so please root for our collective sanity. Thanks! Make sure to follow us on Instagram for some sneak peeks and subscribe for future videos. Have an enchanted day, and we'll see you next time. Bye!
Barb, no!